everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grassroots Racer. This week I speak to a man who describes himself in his Instagram bio as an old man who skids. He's a driver trainer, he's a precision driver and drifter, and I can't wait to find out more about his motorsport journey. So it's a big welcome to Kev Flynn. So how are you tonight, Kev?
Good, thanks for having me along. This is, I think your little podcast is awesome.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a while and I'm really enjoying it. So first up, how do you like to sort of describe how you got into motorsport?
How did I get into motorsport? Motocross. The first thing I did was motocross. So I was very lucky to have grown up with a very, very successful motocrosser, and I rode with him quite a lot. And I also managed to get all my hands on all his used parts and stuff like that. So I always had good gear, and we rode together for a very long time. Then I moved to when I got my car license. I did a tiny bit of rally, not much, a little bit of sort of car club stuff, motor carners and things like that. A bit of karting, not a great deal. I went to karting a couple of times, but most of my working life, I've been stuck at the racetrack most days of the week since around about 1989. Doing driver training courses.
When did you start drifting, or did you do stunts first?
So I did started off doing driver training. I started with two guys called, you've probably never heard of them, you're too young. Started with two guys called Jim Murcott and Peter Brock. I started with those guys in 1989. And I progressed through all the sort of stuff that they did. And I got asked to do some television commercial work. Back in those, so you've got to remember back in those days, I'm sounding like an old person now, back in those days, the advertising laws in Australia were very different to what they are now. So you could do all sorts of fun stuff. You know, we were doing skids and all sorts of wacky stuff. So for me, there was, it's not as though I was doing it every week, but there was a reasonable amount of work doing precision driving for TV ads and that sort of thing. I did a few live shows for vehicle launches and things like that. In fact, the original Toyota Orion launch, I can tell you was Bathurst Day 2006, if I remember correctly. I know that it was a big event for me that day, and it was the day that Craig won Bathurst, Lowndesy won Bathurst, and he won the Peter Brock Trophy. So that was a big day in his life. I was driving a Toyota Orion on two wheels into the Sydney Olympic Dome on that day for the launch, and it was like a $400,000 prototype, that car. And I rolled it. Yeah, so that was a big day for me as well. So yeah, big day for Craig that day. It was a big day for me as well. But when they changed the advertising laws, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But I went overseas quite a bit doing it. Went to some wacky countries like Korea and India and places like that, doing really crazy television commercials with, you know, huge jumps and stuff like that. It was fantastic. Then they really tightened up the advertising laws in Australia, and they did that about, will be almost 25 years ago now. So guys like me for television commercials were being used less and less because there's less stuff that we could show. So we're still doing sort of live stuff. And I thought, as part of my driving school, why don't I invent a stunt driving experience? So I launched the stunt driving experience, more than 20 years ago. And we've had thousands of people come through it. We use Mini Coopers, and we had participants come through that. As I said, we've had thousands and thousands of them come through that, and they do handbrake turns and 360 spins, and they do ramp to ramp jumps. And I take them in my two-wheeling car. I take them on two wheels in my two-wheeling car as well. So that's my precision driving sort of career up to this point.
Yeah. So with your two-wheel car, what car is it? What model?
I've used all different sorts of cars, but different age cars. But I've always used Toyotas actually. So the one I've got at the moment is just a Toyota Yaris, and that car has done. We actually reset the odometer when we built that car, so it's done about 11,000 k's on two wheels. That's a lot of rides. Yeah.
So which side gets worked more, the right or the left?
I always go passenger side up. So we work the right-hand side harder than the left-hand side. Yeah. I've got the original. I almost said I've got the original. I think I'm on my second set of left-hand side tyres on that car. But on the right-hand side, the worst day we've ever had, we did 38 tyres in one day. But on average, that car uses around about 15, 16 tyres a day.
Oh, really?
Right-hand side tyres, that is, because we drive on the sidewall of the tyre.
Yeah.
Yeah. It burns through them. Yeah.
Would you have to put sort of like different suspension in it to the landing?
Be surprised. No, you'll be surprised. You can control that with practice, how hard the car lands. So if you're a passenger and I don't like you, you're going to get a hard landing. If I do like you, I'll give you a nice gentle landing. But what the big thing that we do, you have to lock the diff. So effectively, you're turning the axle into the same sort of axle that a kart's got, because otherwise, what happens as soon as you get up on two wheels, the power wants to go to the wheel in the air, so you're not going to go anywhere. And the other thing we do, we run 90 psi in the right-hand side tyres, just to stop the sidewalls from caving in.
Yeah. Do you have to put a special roll cage in them, or would you just use a regular?
No. My insurance company makes me have like a safety device out the side when I'm taking passengers, but when I'm sort of mucking around or making films or driving by myself, it just looks like a normal car. Yep.
Yeah. And would you say that the Toyota Yaris is sort of the best car for it?
I'll tell you why we use the Toyota. We use Minis for everything else, but I've just told you how many tyres I go through in a day. So as you can imagine, we've got a lot of spare wheels for that car. We've got about 130 spare wheels for that car. I know all this sounds ridiculous until you see the logistics of how it works. So because we've got 120, 130 spare wheels for that car, it doesn't mean that we've got 130 spare wheels for it all the time. We might have 60 of those wheels at the tyre shop getting refitted. So we could only have maybe 60 wheels at our disposal. And you might think 60, but I mean, if we have a bad day and we do 25 tyres and then we do another 25 tyres the next day, we're starting to panic. So suddenly 120 or 130 spare wheels doesn't sound like a hell of a lot. But because we've got that many Toyota spare wheels, for us to change cars, it's not just a matter of changing brands or whatever. We've got to change all the spare wheels then as well. So it's a big deal. So that's why with the two-wheeler, that's one of the reasons why we've always stuck with Toyotas.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite stunt that you've seen someone do, and have you either done it or want to do
it? Definitely the thing I like doing the most, driving on two wheels. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about your drifting now. What would you say is the hardest part about drifting?
Battling, competition. Yeah, the drifting thing, what I'm going to say is, if you've got motorsport experience, I'm going to say you would pick up I'm going to say, Ed, you would pick up the drifting thing quite quickly. The only thing you sort of need to get your head around, normal motor racing guys can't get their head around how much we punish the car. We really beat the crap out of the car. So you got to get your head around that. But other than that, you pick up the drifting thing quite quickly. What's difficult to pick up is battling. When you're running super close to the, door to door with the other car, and when you're on your lead run, not making mistakes, being fast and not making mistakes. So your lead run is supposed to mimic your qualifying run, and your chase run, you're supposed to be as close to that car as you possibly can. And it's really easy to get lost in the smoke. And the only reason why you'll get lost in the smoke is because you're too far back. So you're pretty much rubbing doors the whole time. That takes a lot of practice. Yeah.
And with your lead run, would you sometimes, if you were being really competitive, would you sometimes be a little bit cheeky on how you're driving, or
yeah,
do you just
100%? Yeah, if you're competing against Japanese people, you can kind of play the dumb foreigner a little bit, but you'll only get away with that in the first one or two battles. And they'll come to you as a collective group and say, oh, we understand that in your country you might battle this way, but this is how we battle. So, we'd appreciate if you did it this way from now on. But you're trying to, you in a sort of sneaky way, you're trying to disappear up the road in front of the person that's chasing you. But it's a big thing in Japan where this is not drag racing, this is drifting. So we really don't like it if you've got to disappear on the car in front of you. So be chaseable, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So that when you're battling, they want to see a real battle.
Mm-hmm.
When you're racing your kart and you get into turn one in first place and everyone behind you has had a bit of a kerfuffle and tripped over each other, and you're halfway up the straight and you have a look behind you and you're like, I'm kind of half a lap in front. You know that feeling? And it's not really talent that's got you there. It's a bit of luck.
Although I wasn't ever allowed to look behind me in karting. My dad said, every time you look behind you, you'll lose 2 seconds, when I was like 7 years old, and it got imprinted in my head. And so I never really looked behind me. But if I was turned in the corner, exiting the corner, and I could see that second place was entering, I knew I had a fair gap.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is,
I know what you're saying.
They want to see you fight. Yeah. They don't want to see you break away and drag race and disappear into the distance. They want to see you fight.
Yeah. And what would you say is sort of the best technique for when you're chasing because of all the smoke? Do you have...
Got to be close. You have to be close. And it's particularly on fast tracks. And there's some fast tracks, I can tell you. Fast tracks where you... like my favorite track in Japan is a stadium circuit called Minami. It's very famous. That's the one where you jump into the stadium, and you're jumping into the stadium at around about 120 k's, and you're actually jumping to a wall and going down a real steep hill. So you're jumping at that wall at sort of 120 or whatever, and when you're this far from someone's bumper bar and you're doing that, you got a lot of faith in them that they're not going to make a silly mistake and kill everyone, kill us both. But the hardest thing about chasing is being close enough and maintaining that proximity. Yeah. Because you just particularly if you're chasing a low power car or it's wet, it's not so much of an issue. But wet's another story altogether. But if you're chasing a high power car, if you're not close enough, you get lost in the smoke.
Yeah, it was I can't believe that you actually had to jump into the stadium. So that's pretty cool.
You jump into the stadium, and the higher the horsepower. In Japan, the higher the horsepower you've got, the stickier the tyres you're on. So if you look at us in my level, when we jump into the stadium, we're, the speed we're traveling at, we're probably doing 100, 120 or so. The D1 guys are with the 1200 horsepower cars, they're on sticky tires and they're going in there at sort of 150, 160. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm lucky if I was lucky if I get that in my my supercut that I was running a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the speeds. I've got to say, a lot of car racing people don't understand the speed. The speeds are very high.
Yeah.
Very high. Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly on the Japanese tracks, they're very high. Yep.
Like I can imagine, like 1 minute you'd be having some tight sections, and then you'd be going through. Like I can imagine drifting through fast sections on tracks would be very hard.
Yeah.
It'd be harder than slow sections.
So in other countries, and I don't really drift in other countries, and I'm not here to say other countries are not as good or whatever, but in other countries, they tend to run a lot of corners. In Japan, most competitions are 2, maybe 3 corners tops. So it's sort of over and done with, and it's generally you'll arrive at the first corner going very, very fast, and the Japanese judges want to see what they call the fly, and what the fly is, I'm going to explain something to you. You're going to think I'm nuts. They want you to turn the car and then project the car forward. Okay, so and until you can see it and do it and understand it, you're like, that's a physical impossibility. So I'll do it so you can see it on the screen. So they expect you to turn and then project the car forward like that in a straight line. And typically you'll do it with your clutch pushed in, revving the engine as you're doing it. So you might be doing, depending on the circuit, you're doing, 120, 130 with your clutch pushed in with a car that's traveling sideways at high speed, because that is drifting. And you'll generally, what I'm going to tell you is up to the first corner, the apex of the first corner, from when you initially turn the car until you get to that apex, that's where you're judged on the most. I'm going to say sort of 80% of the judging is up till that point. And then the rest of it, what they call the smoke show, when you're on the gas and making smoke, in the Japanese competitions, that's not scored very highly. That's probably 20% of your score. So what they want is they want to see you go from straight to snap to sideways and then project straight ahead. And as I said, if particularly if Japanese drifting is foreign to you, it's hard to get your head around that. But that's typically what the Japanese judges want to see.
And what about stuff like they doing like a 360 into the corner, or like coming in backwards and then drifting it? Like, what about those sort of things? Do you get
so backwards entries are a bit of a fad, and they're cool. We get a lot of foreign guys come to Japan, and they go to, so the circuit I go to, Ebisu circuit, there's seven tracks at the one venue. So it's not like Australia where there's one circuit at one venue. They've got seven drifting parts, or 7 circuits at the one venue. And a lot of the American guys and the UK guys and the Polish guys and Irish guys, they go up to the North Course, which is the highest course up on the mountain, and they practice these reverse entries, and they're freaky to watch because literally they're going into the corner at high speed with the car traveling backwards, and then they drive off from that. But that's impossible for you to chase. You can't, you can't chase that. So in competition, if you do if you try and do a backwards entry in a competition, it's not a chaseable lead. So you're not actually going to be scored very high on that.
Yeah. So for the viewers and for me, wondering, so you do like battles where you lead, so the person behind you has to chase and follow you as close as possible, and then you chase another person. That's the battles. Do you do like a skill one as well?
So there's so in the series we run at, depending on the time of the year, because the first round of the year is, you're probably going to get around about 30 guys will attend that. because it's just in the northern hemisphere. It's the end of winter. And then, so we had about sort of 30 guys at that one. And the summer one, and summer in the summer round in Japan is very hot. So you get about sort of 30 guys there as well. A lot of the guys from Poland and Finland and countries like that, they don't want to come over for the summer round because it's too hot for them. But they'll have, you can run a Japanese domestic series during that period as well, which I like to do because it's better or different sort of competition where you're running against the pure Japanese guys. But for the last round, which is the autumn round, a lot of guys go over for, and some big names go over for it. Like I'll drop a big name for you, Kaylee Rovenpera. He does it. He's just won a few rounds of the World Rally Championship. He comes over and runs in it. You get guys like real famous sort of American guys like Adam LZ. Have you heard of him? He's sort of real big name. Like guys like that, they'll come over and do that round. And you'll get FD guys, like Formula Drift guys will come over and do it as well. Yeah. So where I'm going with that is, so with there's 16 positions, and the first thing you've got to do is qualify for those 16 positions. And I can tell you, because it's happened to me, it's a very long way to go to Japan to not qualify. Yeah. So your battle tree is the top 16. So it's kind of like karting where you've got to qualify well, and then you just go through your battle tree. So if you win the event, so you'll go top 16, then you'll go to top 8, then you'll go to top 4, and then you'll go final 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to win every battle.
You mentioned the karting. I believe your son James does some karting. How is he going with that? And is he having heaps of fun?
He does a lot of driving, and he's done a lot of driving from very young. So effectively he grew up at the racetrack, and he's been surrounded by people that race cars and people that race karts and all that sort of stuff. So he doesn't really know any different. He's actually not doing anything at the moment because he's got a plaster cast a week out before the AKC round. I'd like to tell you that he's damaged his arm by wrestling a crocodile or something like that, but I don't have a very amazing story to tell you. He tripped over a log at school, and he's fractured his arm above the elbow. So effectively he's out for sort of 7 weeks. So I think he's got about 5 weeks to go or something, 4 or 5 weeks to go. But yeah, he started driving when he was 4, started racing at Stony Creek. They let him race there at 5. So by the time he got to AKA, he'd already done a couple of years of racing. And he's still in Cadet 9 now. So this is his last year of Cadet 9.
Yeah. I broke like that part of my elbow when I was just before I started karting. Mine wasn't spectacular either. I jumped off a swing and landed on it. But yeah, Cadet 9 was definitely a favourite category for me. So I wish him luck for Cadet 12 when he moves into there, because it's definitely a different experience.
Yeah, we know, but we're looking forward to it. We're not on a journey to become professional racing car drivers or anything like that. We're sort of he's good because he doesn't get too upset if things don't go his way. In fact, he doesn't get upset at all if things don't go his way. By the same token, he doesn't go, nuts when he wins or anything like that. He's got a pretty level head, and our journey is not to become professional racing car drivers or anything like that. We're there to enjoy it. So, he's definitely looking forward to Cadet 12. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I remember it was a bit of a difficult first year, but after the first year, you sort of pick up how they all race and stuff. So it shouldn't be a big deal for him.
The front running guys in Cadet 12 are very impressive. the consistent front-running guys in Cadet 12 are very impressive.
Yeah. I could not agree anymore with that. Yeah, it's a very competitive category. But do you have any advice for someone who wants to enter motorsport, sort of how you did, and do a bit of training or stunts or even drifting?
What I'll say is, a lot of guys think that the only way you're ever going to earn a living or something like that driving a car is by being a racing car driver. Well, I can tell you that's not the truth. I've got quite a large company, and I'm driving cars on racetracks every week. I get paid to drive very expensive cars very fast. I don't have to worry about someone coming along with more money and, losing my seat for the year or anything like that. So what I'm going to say to you is, I know a lot of guys, a lot of sort of karting guys have, aspirations of being a racing car driver and all, and that's all good. That's, fantastic. But there's other ways that you can earn a living and drive. I'm going to say I drive more than most racing car drivers do. So there's more to it than just being a racing car driver. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're saying, you're probably in the car every week or so.
Yep.
That sounds like a pretty fun job for people who love cars, just to get paid to jump in a car every week and drive. So I'm the chief instructor.
I'm the chief instructor for BMW Australia. So I conduct all the BMW driving courses around Australia. So that's about 100. It's about 100. Well, when there's no COVID around, that's this year. It's a little bit over 100 days of BMW, and this year, sadly, we'll be spending 6 weeks, I think, in Germany as well with BMW, burning around there. So there, we've got a fleet of brand new M3s and M4s and M2s and a few other cars as well, minis and X3 M40Is in our fleet, as well as the other stuff I do with driver dynamics. I'm driving cars around the racetrack almost every week.
I just find that, I can't really imagine being in a race car every week. At the moment, I've been pretty busy. Just this past Sunday, I was doing Motorcana, and then the week before that, I was racing Formula V at Sandown. So it's
I saw you there.
You did?
Yeah, my office is at Sandown, so I'm at Sandown every day. But yeah, I've been at Sandown pretty much every day for the last 30 years, unless I'm at some other track. But yeah, my office is at Sandown, so we're there we're the permanent resident driving school there. So I saw you there.
Right.
Not last weekend, the weekend before. Yeah.
Yep. Well, when we come back in August, I'll see if I can knock on the door and say hi.
Yeah, come on. Well, I've got something else for you, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I'm going to say is, I think a great thing to do is to get into cars as quickly as you can. And people think getting into cars is expensive, but if you're doing motorcanas are ridiculously cheap, and you're 12 years old, and suddenly you're driving a car and you're doing it in a competition and you're learning to rotate that car and brake that car and make it turn and accelerate and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. I think like James will be doing motorcanas and skid pan work and all that sort of stuff pretty much the day he turns 12.
Yeah.
So I think you're definitely on the... When did you start doing motorcanas?
Well, I got my license a week after my birthday, so probably started August of 2020. $20 entry, and then I got I got 1.6 litre car, so it takes basically no fuel. Just take 40 minutes to the...
I was going to say, and you can drive it. You can drive it to the event. Your parent can drive that car to the event, take your spare wheel out of the boot or whatever you want to do with it, pump the tyres up or let the tyres down or whatever you want to do, and off you go. You're driving. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And like even some categories like Formula V, we've actually realised rather than trying to keep up with the big teams in go-karting, if you go to cars, it's actually nearly as cheap as karting. It's obviously a little bit more expensive, but still, like, you might as well be racing in cars, which is way more fun. And like, I'm loving cartocross and motorcarter. Like,
it's fantastic. You're learning really good control skills. Really good car control skills. Yeah.
Like, I think if I can learn how to drive on dirt, like, it's going to help me a lot when it comes to tarmac with car control. So
100%. Yeah. The more you're doing it, the more you're getting used to it, the more that becomes normal. Yeah. When your level of driving is at where everybody else is out of control, trying to keep up with you, if that makes sense to you, you're at a good level. Yeah. So the more time you're spending on the verge of being out of control, the better that you're going to be on that edge, if that makes sense to you. If you've been doing it, you already know the answer to that.
Well,
in drifting, we call that seat time.
I think everyone calls it seat time, to be honest.
Yeah, the more time you spend driving, the better you're going to get. It's literally as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, that's why we do a bit of motorcarter, because one, it's cheap, and two, it keeps me experienced on dirt. And if I ever don't like tarmac, I can always go to dirt.
More time you spend driving and the different variety of things you're driving, Shane Van Gisbergen, look him up, the better you're going to be at driving. Probably a lot of racing car people don't know that Shane Van Gisbergen regularly does drift events. He's very good at it too. He does drifting, rallying, you name it, he does it.
Cameron Waters, you might not have heard of him. He does sprint speedway. Yeah. He's been doing that pre-season, so he's doing all right with that.
The guys who have, normally the guys who have got a variety of experience, you're generally going to see them up the front once it starts to rain, because that's when pure car control comes into it. Yeah.
Well, Sunday.
Go on.
Yeah. Sunday was a perfect experience. It was a perfect example of wet weather driving.
Yeah. And it's something like, I really, really can't tell you how much I like burning around in the rain. Absolutely love it. Love it to bits. And I've made my son, whenever it rained, we'd be at the track burning around. And I taught him how to drift and hold big slides and all that sort of stuff. So he thought he was just out there burning around having fun. But then when he goes to wet race meetings, he's pretty much he's off into the sunset, because he spent so much time sliding around in the wet. Yeah. I
remember when I was doing karting in Cadet 9, my dad used to, after school, he'd go, grab your helmet and suit, we're going to go up to the car club, and it'd be raining, and I'd be like, why are you doing this? And then he'd put me on slicks to send me out.
Yep.
I'd probably end up in the gravel like 6 times, but I learned eventually.
Yeah, you talk to someone like Adam Macro. Do you know who Adam Macro is?
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk to someone like Adam. His dad, Peter. So in the late 80s, early 90s, Adam Macro it was unusual when he didn't win a race in karts. And he was the same. His dad would take him there after school. Whenever it was raining, Adam would be there all by himself, burning around the track, learning how to drive in the wet. And well, I mean, he was pretty much unbeatable wet or dry, but particularly in the wet, he'd just make everybody else look like they were in a completely different race. And it all just comes down to practice.
Yeah. Like we were saying before, time in the seat is the most crucial part of racing.
Yep. The best cheating you can ever do is practice.
Yeah, I agree with that. Whenever I went out, I made sure I did as many laps as possible and just gain knowledge of the track. Like by the end of my karting career, I sort of knew all the tracks I went to very well.
Yep. So if you're at the point where you don't have to think about your driving anymore, you're thinking about setup and stuff like that, you no longer have to think about your driving. That's sort of the level that you want to get yourself at. And
Well,
that all comes with this.
Yeah, sorry. I'm now at a level where I got to focus on gear changes and sort of just a bit of brakes. Because in the cars, the brakes are obviously a bit different. So I sort of like automatically go from apex to exits naturally, but now I just got to focus on braking properly in this Formula V and the gear shifts.
Yeah.
It's a bit different, but I'm adapting and enjoying.
Yeah, driving a car and driving a kart are very different, particularly once you start to get to a high level of it. But yeah, and a lot of people don't necessarily make that transition from karts to cars just because of the difference. That's true. Now, I'll tell you how they do it in Japan. One of my friends over there, his son is 12, and he's this year. His name is Hiroya Manoa, or they call him Hiro Manoa. So he's a 12-year-old. He started drifting in Japan when he was around about 8. He's now been drifting, and he competed. He's gone through the lower ranks. He competed in the second level of Formula Drift last year, which would be the equivalent of the, I don't know, what do they call it? In the second tier level of V8 supercars here.
Development Series, Super 2.
Whatever. Yeah, Super 2. So he effectively did that last year. Now he's an FD, driving for one of the big teams, and he'll be driving like a 900 horsepower car this year. He's 12 years old, and he's competing in Japan now at the highest level because there's a limit on when you can start. So you can start driving over there at the tracks when as long as you can drive a car, they'll let you drive at the tracks there. That's pretty much how it works. So they progress through to big horsepower cars at pretty early age.
I mean, if it was the same over here, my dad would have had me in a car at probably age 8 or something.
Yeah.
It's just, I agree though. If you can drive it, you should be allowed to have a go at least. See.
Yeah, I'm going to say Australia is terribly over-regulated.
Yeah.
The racetrack. We go to the effort of building racetracks, and then we do everything we possibly can to stop you from driving on them. Whereas the mindset in other countries there's a racetrack there, go and drive on it.
I've really enjoyed this chat, by the way. So it's been really interesting speaking to you tonight, Kev. And I think you could teach me a thing or two about drifting, to be honest.
I see you've got Petters as a sponsor as well.
Yes.
Yes.
It's the Bendigo store.
Oh, Bendigo, yeah. The guy in Bendigo goes right into motorsport.
Yeah, Grant Phillips.
Yeah.
We actually bought a 1985 Alpha 90 off them guys. The old car he used to race. So, and I wish your son the best of luck as you continue through your motorsport journey yourself, and as he's having a bit of fun out there on the track. If anyone out there is doing any racing this week, remember to drive fast and take chances on the track, of course. So, thanks so much, Kev, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.